Hello? There we go.
Hello, look at us
Hi, look at us doing the
do-
thing.
doing the most with the least. How are
Yes.
we?
Yeah. Is that how it goes? I love it.
I can't believe we're
Oh,
actually making this happen. This has been
yeah.
this has been like a month in the work. Hey, you good now? No, I'm actually not good now. Are you good now? No, I can't do it right now. I'm like, okay, fine, let's go now.
Are we doing it in 20 minutes? No, I already told you. Were you at MFM? Were you at labor and delivery when I was like, no, that day's not gonna work.
No, I missed that. Sorry.
Yeah, it's all good. We're here now.
I was getting my blood pressure and my temperature and cervix checked at the same time. It's good
All the
times.
things.
All the things.
Yes, the whole work.
So, on that note, what we are discussing today is birth plan, right? For pregnancy after loss.
Yes.
I'm happy we're having this conversation. I mean, it was your idea to actually document this because I'm sure you get a ton of questions like I do. The number one thing I see a lot is a lot of moms after loss are kind of scared to go into another pregnancy because they truly have no idea how they're going to navigate it.
And
And
I really think like for both of our experiences, having your first baby die is a
Mhm.
very unique part of that whole process because like going into so I should introduce myself really quick. I'm Amanda. I'm Junie's mom. I
Oh,
live
they
in
know you.
Minnesota. They know me, but for those of you who don't, it sounds like I'm giving a speech at a wedding. I'm also a wedding photographer. My name is Amanda. I live in Minnesota in a small town. Juniper was our first daughter. She was stillborn at full term in August of 2018. 363 days later, we welcomed wonderfully alive Coral on August 7th of 2019. So she was born 2 days before Junie's first birthday. And then 2 years after that, our third daughter, Jersey, was born, snuck right into August as well on August 31st of 2021.
Mm.
And just also to share with our first with Junie, I was a high risk pregnancy because she was growth restricted. And so that's another piece of my puzzle of that my first pregnancy was watched really closely at a high level of care. And so then going into another pregnancy and another birth and delivery was it was really hard to do anything more, if that makes sense, because I was so closely monitored with Junie and then she died. So it was like we all very much feel like the rug was pulled out from under us, but like even more so and like almost in a way of with that high level of care, I don't feel like I was told that something could go wrong. Like it felt the opposite of like nothing can go wrong because we're watching you so close. And so I wasn't educated on fetal movements and things like that. So all of that
When
to
I
say,
when I first heard your story and you had said, because when you and I first connected, it was probably just months after Brody had died. And
mhm,
I was like, I should have had high risk care. I should have had high risk care and closer monitoring. And then you're like, but I did, and she still died. And so
mhm,
I remember being relieved at that time. At that time, like, oh my God, okay, well then maybe there was nothing they could have done. But now, as years have gone, I'm enraged by that. Like I'm enraged
yes,
that you had it. So
yes,
my
yes,
attitude, my perspective of that, your story, it's infuriating that you still had, and you're not the only one. I know I have a close friend here who
yes,
was highly monitored, and it still happened, and it was like
mhm,
that's not okay. So
yes.
that fueled your fire. You are out
That
there
and that
doing the same
really,
thing. Yeah.
yeah, and that really fuels me up to work on the stillbirth prevention advocacy that I do. Because like Junie's story really illustrates the gap in care. Yeah, so all that to say is that then when I was going into another pregnancy and another birth, and then that timing of it being 2 days before Junie's first birthday, because I did get induced at 37 weeks with my second with Coral, um, it was just hard. There's really, I say often that pregnancy after loss is the second hardest thing I've ever done, as you probably know. The first obviously being giving birth to death and then leaving that baby at the hospital. So if you are in the trenches, if you hope to be in the trenches of pregnancy after loss, if you're, doing the pregnancy after loss a second time over,
There's not
buckle
many of
up,
us. Yeah.
hold on tight. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a roller coaster.
I remember desperately wanting to get pregnant again. Like, can I have another one? When can I do this again? Like at the hospital, like a psycho. Like, and a lot of us did that. Like,
Oh
when can
no,
I do this again? Yeah.
not psycho at all, because it's like, especially with the loss of your first, you want to be that mom. You want to be that mom to that living child. So I'm just gonna correct you there. You're not a psycho, but
It
it
felt
feels
like psycho.
psychotic.
It did. And then, but
Yeah.
then when I started talking and all these moms were like, I asked in my bed when I could try again. And I was like, oh,
Hmm.
hey, we all do that. It's like your arms are completely
Oh, a
empty. They
million
physically
percent.
ache. Yeah. And then there was a
Hmm.
time where I was like, I never want to do this again. Brody's my only one. I don't want to, I don't want to, it felt like deceit. It was like, no, he's my only one. I don't want to
Yes,
replace
that
him.
is such a good word for it. Yeah.
Crazy. Then I was like,
Yeah.
you know what? I've got a good team. I've got my answers. I think I can do this again. And my number one goal was to just prevent what happened to him. And for those of you who don't know, it is said that he had a small placenta, but he ended
That
up
you did
dying.
not know during his pregnancy,
Did
right?
not know. Uh-huh. And my doctor and the hospital and everybody said that he was perfect, but it was Dr. Kleiman who said he had a small placenta, and then that it looks like there was an apparent cord compression, and that's he died before his placenta could kill him. And they had changed my due date, and there was like I was farther along than I
Oh
thought I
yeah, I
was.
forgot that we both had that
That
happen.
that's the
The
part that
changed
pisses me
due
off the
date.
most because if
Yes.
they had the correct due date, it would have been seen that he was significantly smaller than he should have been.
And
And
Junie too. And they changed Junie's due date by 11 days to make up for her
same.
small growth. Yes. But like
Mhm.
when she was born, her head was 38 weeks, 2 days. Like that was on because she had the asymmetric IUGR. I don't remember if Brody did. Oh
Oh,
wait.
yeah. And so, but what ended up
Yeah.
happening was I was like, when I have my tools on how to prevent this from happening again, I'm
Hmm.
good. I'm good. What I didn't know was that you're diving back into the shark infested waters of the
Yeah, it's
sharks that
like
bit you.
getting on the Titanic again. Like
It's
it's
mental, it's
it's
emotional, it's woof,
it's
it's a lot.
insanity. It really is insanity. And like I talk to people frequently about how, like after your baby dies, you see pregnant women or you see babies and you're triggered, and then you become your own trigger in pregnancy after loss. And
Mm-hmm.
then like if you give birth to a live baby after that, you're like a front row seat to this show of grief and joy, and it's really complicated. And then like again, going back to us having our first babies die, is we don't know what that experience feels like. And I remember like walking into Coral's pregnancy and birth being like, I feel like I've done this before, but I haven't, because
Mhm, mhm.
like, oh, like they got the warmer out and they never had like the warmer out for Junie. Like they brought the bassinet in, and like even when I got induced with Junie, the nurse even pointed out like she was doing the bands on my belly, and like
Mhm,
we had found out Junie had died at my last ultrasound at MFM, on a different location. Then we went to the hospital to deliver. And
mhm.
she's doing the bands, and she even said like, "Oh, you don't need that one, the baby's heartbeat one." And I was like, "Why did you have to point that out?" Like,
Jesus, I don't think I've heard that part of your
yeah,
story.
I think it was just, it's humanity. We're humans, and I think she was processing it out loud as well. But it felt like a middle finger at me of like, oh, this is gonna be different. And like
So
going into
unnecessary.
Junie's birth, even though we knew she had died, I wanted everything to be as normal as possible because it was my first child. And like I knew that I had hoped to have more kids. And so I wanted her experience to be like as quote normal as possible that it could be, because I wanted this to feel like the first of, my several children. And I wanted
Mhm.
that, and I think even at that time I realized how stigmatized baby loss is. And then just it's confusing. Like the word really is confusing, because usually labor and delivery is the happiest thing in the hospital. It's the only place that like is happy in a hospital. If you think about it, you're not getting a knee
Mhm.
repaired or, a hip surgery or heart surgery or whatever. Like you're welcoming life in most cases. And then here we
Mhm.
are showing up with our trauma and tragedy. And it's confusing, I think, for a lot of people to understand that juxtaposition.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the nurses and the doctors, I feel, do need to be informed of what it's like for us to deliver. We'll probably use the term rainbow. Say what you want about
Yeah,
the term,
air
but
quote it.
It's just one of those terms that needs no explanation because I don't have the strength to explain what I'm saying. So, like, okay, fine, we're delivering a rainbow. That means it's after loss, whatever. But a lot of
Mhm.
times they don't really realize that it is a different experience for us, even though they're living. Because the previous experience we had, they were dead. So
Yeah.
you have come up with essentially what is a good bullet pointed plan. Your plan starts when you get to the hospital. Is that right?
Yeah, but I want to back up to like when I first found out I was pregnant again after loss with my quote air quote rainbow. My first OB appointment, I think we were chatting about this the other day. The first request I made for my birth with my rainbow was I wanted to deliver in the same room that I had delivered my daughter that died. And I think some people might go, "Oh my gosh, that's crazy." For me, and unique parts of my story is that before we got pregnant with Junie, I was trying to be a loss photographer, and I went through this peer companion training, which is just wild to think about. And so I do think that that background has helped me have kind of a different mindset and a different approach to a lot of this stuff. And I think it helps me be so outspoken, um, in the dark humor and all the things. Um, and so then when I got pregnant with my second, I like really was I was latching onto the thought that the space where she was born, where Junie was born, that had died, was like the only time we got to spend with her. That's the
Mhm,
only space we
mhm,
got to be with her outside of my tummy. And like I know that she had died before she was born. Like I am not out of touch with reality, but like in my mind, it wasn't until like we left her in that room, like that she was really like gone, if that makes
mhm.
sense. Like I
Yeah.
felt like we were still kind of like with her. So take that what you will. But so then when I got pregnant a second time, the first thing I said to my OB at my like, I think I was I think I was barely like 5 weeks. I was like, I want to deliver in room 6 again if I can. And like I knew that like that might not happen, like, but I said, I want to deliver in there again. I don't want to be put in there by accident. I don't want to be put in there without anyone knowing what my connection to this birth room is. And also to to say that I'm in a small town, a small hospital, like whatever. So that helped make it possible too. I also knew that it had like a different air exchanger. It was like their isolation room, and that's why they put moms that have had losses in there because you can't hear
Mhm.
the living babies as well. So I knew I was possible to like
You know,
get that room.
if you had told me that prior to my last experience, I would have been like, that's wild. But
Hmm.
I recently had to go to labor and delivery because I was having some
Yeah,
discomfort and thought it was preterm labor. And, I had a history of preterm labor because Wolfie came
yeah,
early. But
yeah.
they put me on the high risk floor where I was. So when Brody was born, I hemorrhaged and I had to go to the
Hmm.
ICU for like a day and a half. So he went to the morgue. So my last day in the hospital, 2 days later,
Hmm.
3 days later, they brought him to me in the high risk room. And I will never forget that room. And
Was
what,
that by your request or did they just
no,
show up with him? See, and I think that's very different
no, no,
because
no. I asked to
yeah.
see him
Oh, okay.
because we were getting discharged. They wouldn't let us
Sure.
leave until like the funeral wouldn't home would not come get him until we were
Hmm.
discharged.
Yep.
So that making that call to leave with him still there was fucking crazy.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
had to have a nurse come and take him from me. Like I said, I don't know how to hand him over. I need you to take him from me.
Yes.
Oh God, I haven't
That
talked
is
about
the
this in a
worst
while.
possible. Yeah, yeah, I got the
So,
tissues.
woo, but I can see now after like I kind of spiraled when I wasn't in the exact same room a couple days
So you were
ago.
in a different you delivered him in a different room, and then
Totally
this
different room.
room you're talking about is the last. So mine, just to also to like illustrate it, mine was all one and the same. The room that I gave
Right.
birth to Junie in was the room we stayed in. I did not hemorrhage, thankfully. So we stayed in this room,
Right.
room 6, for that 24 hours we were with Junie. And so Junie never left us. And so we left Junie in that room. Does that like I think all of that helps it be better
Well, the number
or feel
one thing
better.
is like it's a trigger. The room could be considered a
Mhm.
trigger. It's the
Mhm.
last time you saw them. It's the room where you held them
Mhm.
the last. And so what my point is basically like now that I was in a room that was very similar to his, I wouldn't
Mhm.
mind being back because that's where I last held him and that's where I feel close to
Yeah.
him. I feel closer to
Yes.
him in those rooms. And at first, it was horribly triggering because I didn't expect it. But the fact that you
Yeah.
set it up and you expected to be in that room, I think it's not a
And
terrible
by my
idea.
choice. And I think
Yeah.
by my choice, because I thought the worst thing was gonna be, like, they'd put me in that room and they would have no idea, it wouldn't have been my choice,
Right.
and so, like, in a way, I think of it as, like, reclaiming that trigger, and, like,
Absolutely.
because it was, like, the room at the end of the hall too. I didn't wanna, like, go in there to have another baby and be like, "Oh, that room," because, like, it is terrible. And also to add, because I photograph lost families, I had been back to that room
Oh, gosh.
before I had Coral,
Okay.
and I think that helped too, because the first time I went back was, so Junie was born in August. I went back in January to photograph Junie's boyfriend. We call him Wyatt.
So
We've
cute.
gotten to be good friends, but it was really wonderful when I showed up to photograph Wyatt's birth. I actually photographed his birth, which was really special too. One of Junie's nurses was working, and she, without me even having to say, she connected the dots of Wyatt's being born in room 6. Room 6 is the last room we saw Junie in. She's like, I'm gonna walk you back there.
Yeah.
And she like let me like she just totally understood it all. And she just like let me take my time, and definitely that first time opening the door again. And then it was just all complicated and compounded by the fact I was there to photograph another loss and meet another family in the same position and all of that. Like opening the door, it was kind of like I thought Junie would still be there. Like
Oh,
I knew
God.
she
Yeah.
wouldn't, but
Yeah.
like that's how that brain works.
Well, let me
So
ask you this.
that was also exposure therapy to that room,
Right. Well,
if that makes
that's
sense.
a
Yeah.
question that I have.
Hmm.
Somebody had said that some mamas will get a tour of the floor and the rooms again prior to giving birth to their baby after loss
Yes.
to kind of
Yes.
break the thing. But I also heard the negative of that is that you walk out again without a
Without a
baby.
baby.
So
Yes.
to prep yourself if you do that. I did not do
Yep.
that because I had to go in to get checked and monitored and I was forced to go through the halls, which I will
Yep.
be honest with you guys, it wasn't a bad thing because then when I showed up again to deliver, I had already been there since Brody and it wasn't as
Yes.
jarring. I didn't have to deal with that like
Like
you did. Yeah.
it still sucks,
It's of
but
course. Yeah, of course.
yeah,
So
yeah.
people do get
I do,
tours.
yeah, I do make that suggestion, and also to point out, Junie's birth, Coral's birth were both pre-COVID.
That's
Coral
a
was
big
August of
deal.
2019 because that was a suggestion I was making to people, and then COVID happened, and then it was like, okay. Another part of kind of on that note is 2 weeks before Coral ended up being born, my blood pressure went up just like it did with Junie. Like 35 weeks, my body's like, this isn't working. And so I think I was just in for an NSP. No, I was in for a BPP, and then they didn't like my blood pressure. So they sent me up in our town to do NSTs. You do have to go to triage on labor and delivery, which was kind of nice. Like if you think about it, like it sounds terrible, but like that exposure therapy. So I was in for an NST, and then my blood pressure was really high. So they're like, you know what, we're gonna keep you overnight to monitor you. And I was like, that's fine. And so then they put me in a postpartum room, which was wild because with Junie, we stayed in the labor and delivery suite or the labor and delivery wing, and we didn't move to postpartum. So I never got to experience postpartum with Junie, which I didn't realize because Junie is my first. I didn't think about this. And so, like, and this is 2 weeks before Junie's birthday. Also, mind you, I'm 35 weeks pregnant with my rainbow. And it was really the best thing ever because, like, even though I was pregnant with Coral at that time, it felt like I got to experience postpartum with Junie before I had Coral. Does that make sense? Like,
Wow. Interesting. Yeah.
it's kind of weird
Yeah.
and wild. And then that experience, so I stayed overnight there, and that experience is what really prompted me to make the door sign and to really work on the birth planner. Like I like to call birth plans like birth preferences because as you
Yeah.
know, we're not in control of all this. But so when I was overnight for monitoring, because I found out like, the nurses all knew me, the doctors all knew our story. They all had my chart. They all read, unlike a lot of experiences, they actually read my chart. They knew, or they just knew what was going on because they were nurses I had with Junie. But the thing that happened was a cleaning lady came in. And again, this was before COVID, so I'm not sure what things are like, but a cleaning lady came in to mop my room. And from the moment she opened the door, it was triggering city. She opened the door And I had Junie's picture like up on the shelf. Also, this postpartum room had a view of the window of room 6 window, which
Mm,
for me was like the best thing ever.
yeah.
But I think, and like I told the nurses, like when they checked me in there, I was like, no, this is okay for me. Like, but for other moms, it might not be, because I'm always advocating, because I know that I'm sometimes this rare breed of how I navigate things. So I like to point it out, like, hey, another mom might not like this, but I'm
So
okay
true.
with it.
Yeah.
Anyways, the cleaning lady like opened the door and she's like, oh, there's no baby in here. Like,
Jesus.
thanks. And then she was like, then when I told her, like, oh, I'm in for monitoring, and she's like, oh, is baby misbehaving? I'm like, no, my body is again. Like, thinking like, oh, my body's gonna kill my baby again because
Yeah.
Junie
Yeah.
died because of preeclampsia and a small placenta. And then she just kept going on and on and on. And then I explained to her, like, oh, my first, because, is this your first? Nope. My first daughter was stillborn at full term. Her name's Junie. She'd be turning 1 in 2 weeks. Like, gave her the whole story as I do. And she was like, oh, my friend had like 8 of those. And her daughter just turned 1 and it's just beautiful and she's happy again. And I was like, no,
No.
no, no, no.
No.
And I'm like, I'm pretty sure you mean like a miscarriage or like
Mm-mm.
a very
Yeah.
different experience. And then like, okay, now you're telling me she has a daughter that turned 1, that like that's great, like super, super helpful. And so
Jesus.
it was just the worst possible conversation and the worst possible timing and all of the things. And ironically enough, I had the highest blood pressure reading right after that visit. And so then I told my OB about that, and the nurses, and because they were like, wow, that's a really high blood pressure. And then we did the steroid shot because my blood pressures were so high. And also to say, I don't let a medical provider ever like dismiss a blood pressure reading because you're stressed or whatever either, because that did happen with Junie. So
Yep.
um anyways, I did end up staying pregnant for 2 more weeks, but that experience made me realize, like, okay, so nurses, doctors, great. Everyone else, the lab people, the cleaning people, the people bringing your food, they don't know what the hell they're dealing with. So that prompted me to make that door sign. And one of the things that I put on that door sign was, like you discussed before, was I don't like the rainbow baby reference too much.
Yeah.
Like I would prefer little sister, little brother. And then
I
with the
think
timing,
rainbow is
yeah.
really for like earlier. I mean, I just don't think it
Hmm.
pertains to
Hmm.
to late stillbirth. I really don't. That's just me. Sorry. Hate me if
Yeah.
you want.
No, I'm with you, because it just feels like dehumanizing to our babies that died, or
Mhm.
like it's just like this euphemism that makes it wrapped up in a tidy bow, like this rainbow, and like I feel like it really dismisses all the trauma and stuff. So anyways, I put that
Yeah.
on my door sign because I did not want someone to come in my room, to mop my room, and to be like, ugh, say
That's so
things like
true. Oh my
like,
God.
oh. So yeah, I'm looking at my sign here. I pulled it up. So with my second child, I made the sign, and I think I sent it to you, or yeah. So I just put like, this is our second child, Juniper's little sibling, and I said we don't know the baby's gender. And I put referencing big sister Juniper. Junie is always a good choice. And then I just put on there like August 9th is Junie's first birthday, because I didn't want people to dance around like death day, birthday, anniversary. Everyone has different ways of describing it, and so I just go with birthday because I can do that. And I said, I don't like the rainbow baby reference. I don't like the term fetal demise, because the medical community really always defaults to their medical background, which is understandable. But then and then I try to always give suggestions of it. If I don't like something, I prefer stillborn or stillbirth. Um, and then a big thing was, don't call me a first time mom. That was so triggering when I had my second baby. And I was so grateful. My OB that delivered Junie, she wasn't the OB that delivered Coral, but she told me that she went and visited lactation for like before lactation came to my room, and was like, dude, do not go in her room and say that she's a first time mom or anything like that. And that was so helpful. So that when lactation came in, then when Coral was born, she she didn't even acknowledge Coral right away. She walked in and she was like, I understand your first daughter Juniper, and like Juniper probably gave you the gift of milk and stuff. And it was just so beautiful and it was
Oh,
so
wow.
wonderful. And so I'm so glad that kind of advocacy like made that conversation.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then the other thing I did put on that sign was, when it comes to holding baby, wait for us to offer instead of asking, because like you were saying, you had to have the nurse take Brody from you. I did not like, because when we left Junie, we left her with a nurse. Like my mindset was like, we're just gonna kind of pretend like I know she was dead, but like we're just gonna kind of pretend she's sick and we're gonna come back. Like that's how I had to make that leaving possible. Like that's what I had to like make my brain. Otherwise, I don't think my legs would have worked if I wouldn't have, played a little
Yeah.
trick there.
Yeah.
So that was a really big thing that I anticipated before Coral was born was I did not, especially in the hospital. That feeling was very much there when she was born that I could not have anyone ask to hold her. I needed to offer. Um, that feeling did diminish once we got home, once we were out of that very, intense
Mm-hmm.
space.
Mm-hmm.
But that was a very helpful thing to put on the sign, just for any random people that came in. And then we did send a letter, like a family prep letter for families too, which I found very helpful. And that was something very helpful during COVID too, because everybody was really navigating that on different comfort levels. But I put that in our like family prep letter too, of like, don't ask to hold the baby and don't ask about our induction plan or anything like that. So
Yeah. And you
yeah.
could put whatever you want on this sign. I think the sign is just a guide to give you ideas of what you can put,
Hmm.
whatever ideas of what you think might make this, uh, God, I'm air quoting, easier
No,
transition
least
into
worst.
least
Least
worst,
worst.
less
That is
sucky.
my, yeah, less sucky. I like it. The other thing I want to point out that I have had conversations around this door sign, and I'm not sure if you did this or not, but I included a picture of Juniper on her sign and I put big sister Juniper because I really do feel like, bless their hearts, that the medical community loses track of the fact that when your baby is stillborn, that is the death of a child. It is
Mm,
not a minor medical event. It is not something you are unaware of. Like our daughter has a name, here's her picture. And so I think that, and like it was just really really powerful and help and encouraging. I don't know if this makes sense to anyone outside of this, but like walking the halls when I got induced with Coral and like came back to the room, the room that I delivered Junie in, and then her picture was on the door. And it kind of reclaimed because when Junie died, they put a flower on the door to, you know,
yeah.
signify a loss had happened. And so it was kind of like a reclaiming and like just another way to keep her present and then to like advocate and remind like very visually, this is why you're not calling me a first time mom because I'm not a first time.
Right.
Yes, I'm a first time nursing mom maybe, but also in a way I'm a second because Junie was born and I had to suppress my milk. Like that's a part of nursing and breastfeeding. So it's
100%.
all, yeah,
That was
it's all
trippy
over the place.
that was trippy having a living because I was like, but I've done this before, but I haven't done this before and I need help. And it's
Hmm.
weird to ask for help because I've already done this before. Very
Yes,
weird. Yeah. Yeah.
yes, very much so. Um, I want to go back to that first OB appointment when I first told my OB like I would like to deliver in room 6 again, if at all possible.
Hmm.
Sadly, with my third, I wasn't able to deliver it in that room, and I'm so glad I did have that experience with Coral with my second. With my third, there was a mom that had COVID, and so it was like the separate air room, so she was in there, so I had to deliver in a
Mm.
different room. Then jokes on me because we got COVID at the hospital when Jersey was born. Like, of course. But I'm so glad it I'm really glad it went in that order that I got to have my second in that same room. Like it made it manageable, I guess. Like I still whatever. Anyways,
Yeah. No, that's right.
um
Yeah.
yeah, so that first OB appointment, and I was thinking about this before we hopped on here. I hope this doesn't trigger you. But when I was first pregnant with my second, my whole like with having such close care with my first, with my second child, like talking to my OB and making our plan for my birth of my second child, we often said a NICU baby is better than a dead baby,
Hmm. Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that was something, and then
And
so I
I
was
can elaborate
so
on that later. Yeah. So,
yeah. Yeah, I
it,
was just so thankful that I'm pretty sure my OB actually said that before I did, which I was so grateful for. Because like that appointment was just like, what more can we do? Like you already had twice a week ultrasounds and twice a week NSTs. The key here was that I was not educated on fetal movement monitoring.
hmm.
And so whenever I do share like how closely monitored I was with Junie, like that is the missing piece of my experience with Junie, and that's why it is so important to monitor your baby's movements when you are pregnant. And so if you are doing pregnancy after loss, first time, a second time, know that that is the key. And so that more ultrasounds might be helpful for you, even though even though I did have more with Junie, but knowing about that fetal movement is the most important thing. The other thing about let's see. Okay, so I was like 5 weeks pregnant, and so we talked about, like NICU baby's better than a dead baby, and it was like, okay, so like kind of playing devil's advocate of what if this happens? What if this happens? What if my blood pressure starts going up? What if,
Mhm.
all these things? And just so everyone knows, because Junie was 38 weeks and 2 days when she died. Because of that switch due date, my chart said I was 36 and 3, and so they were trying to get me to this magical 37. But their ACOG does have a bulletin out, a provider guidance bulletin, that if a family has suffered a previous loss, stillbirth, they can induce at 37 weeks without a medical reason. And a lot of providers don't know about this. A lot of
That
providers will push
without a
back.
medical reason is massive. That needs to be in
Yes,
bold because I hear
yes.
so many saying their doctors refuse to do it before 39. And it's like,
Hmm.
you don't need a medical reason to get that baby out.
Yes, yes. Like, and the caveat is, as long as the parents are educated and knowledgeable that
Mhm,
NICU time may happen, breathing assistance and whatever.
mhm.
And a lot of what I say to moms that are, hopefully going to be that full term, because I know you're kind of like in this like
Yeah.
pregnancy purgatory state.
Yeah.
Um, but like if they're kind of on the fence about that or whatever, I say, okay, so get to 37 weeks and take it a day at a time there. And and so I was so grateful to have that guidance because like I said, the 37-week mark was 2 days before Janie's first birthday, and I did not want them to share a birthday. That felt way too much like jumping back into that shark waters. Um,
And that's the
I
thing.
don't,
If
yeah,
it's if ACOG says you can deliver at 37 without a medical reason, that's meant it's because it's mental and emotional reason. You
yes,
are starting to melt down and slowly deteriorate mentally because you're either approaching the time at which they died or you're
hmm,
getting to a point where the birthday is coming up and you're just
yeah,
spiraling. And
yeah.
that's not good for the baby at all either.
No, no,
So
it's not good for anyone involved, like
mm,
not at all. So, if anyone ever needs a copy of that, I think actually if you just Google like ACOG 37-week delivery,
okay.
and something that I did with my OB about that was I asked her because I was like, okay, I know most hospitals it's like 39 weeks. Like, how can we get around that? I am not going to stay pregnant till 39 weeks with this baby. Like, considering Junie died at 38 and 2 under close monitoring, passing other tests, I'm like, no, not happening. And so like really approached it in like a teamwork sort of way of like what is the extra legwork you have to do to make this happen? And she told me that she had so like the head of the OB had to like approve it. So it was her and this other OB. So that was helpful that she was like, well, I'm approving it and I know the other doctor will approve
I
it too,
love
like
that.
given everything. So that is a really helpful if you're navigating that, navigating birth timing in pregnancy after loss. I think it's really helpful to kind of ask your doctor, like, what hurdles do you have to jump through? Because, a lot of times people are like, oh, the doctor thinks this induction date will be more convenient or whatever.
Yeah.
And with
That's
Jersey, yeah,
yeah. My
no,
doctor was nanny like only did it like 1 day a week. And it was like, okay, I'll take anybody who could get this baby out when I need this
yes,
baby out. It doesn't have to be you,
yes.
just get
And
him out.
I had that conversation with my doctor because I was like, my big issue is continuity of care during my pregnancy. Like, I was like, when it comes to the actual delivery, I'm like, any of you will be great. But like for me and my experience, it was that continuity of care, especially in that third trimester, that
Yeah.
I wanted to see the same doctor every time. I didn't want to be jumping around. And so I told her that I said, I don't care. Like, if you don't end up delivering the baby, that's fine. Like, that's like a lot of times that's the mom's big thing is like, I want this doctor to deliver the baby. And I was like, no,
Like they
my
want
bigger
a
thing is,
redemption, quote unquote. And I want to touch on this
yeah,
later about that whole
yeah,
redemption thing. So, because it
yeah,
doesn't happen all the
yeah.
time.
My
Um,
OB laughed though, because she was like, well, I want to deliver this baby if I'm doing all this hard work in your pregnancy.
they want to be there. The good ones
Yeah.
want to
And
be
so that
there.
was
They want
great.
to be there.
Yeah.
Well, can I
Yeah.
ask
So
you
she was
this?
great.
Have you heard
Yeah.
of moms going in like early to be monitored before their induction date? I've heard of this Some of them will pull the, I have a headache. I don't feel well, even though they're fine. I'm feeling
Mhm.
contractions, even though they're not. They'll like pull these cards to go in and maybe be monitored for like 48, 72 hours, whatever it may be, before their induction date because they're that nervous. Have you heard of that?
Mhm. I definitely have, and it makes like having done, PAL 2 times, I totally makes sense. And like I was already having that close monitoring, with my second and my third as well. So I didn't have to do that, but I'm in full support of that. And ACOG has another guidance that you do not leave the hospital until you feel reassured.
I
So
like that.
make sure like it, and you don't even have to have a real like solid explanation, but if you really do feel off or just your anxiety is getting the best of you, go in. That is what they're there for. That is literally their job, is to check on you and to check on baby and to get you to the end of your pregnancy
Hmm. Hmm.
successfully, healthy, with the best possible outcome. So I really want to fight that notion of like, you're going to be the anxious mom going in a bunch. Like, don't feel like, I know you'll feel that, but try not to feel that at all. Like, don't let that overtake you.
Mm.
But yeah, a lot of like, especially if there's been cases with stillbirth moms in PAL getting pushed back and being like 39 weeks, 39 weeks, 39 weeks, you start going in every day at 37 weeks then. If that doctor is just pushing back, like you just go in, you say you don't feel right. You say the movements don't feel right. Like that's what
Mhm.
you got to do what you got to do. So
Mhm. That's exactly
yeah,
it. You gotta do what
yeah.
you gotta do. And
Hmm.
I think the biggest part about that and making the decision to do something, it comes down to you make the decision even though you don't like the result of that decision. You don't like what you're
Hmm.
gonna have to do. I don't want to go back
Hmm.
in there. I don't want to get monitored again. I don't want to be scared and anxious anymore. But I'm gonna do this anyway because I have to make sure this baby's okay. I can't let it slip
Yeah.
again.
Yeah. A big thing for me was like I didn't want to have any regrets that um like so with Jersey with my third, kind of where you're at right now, with Trey, which I love his nickname by the way. Fun side tangent because I'm neurodivergent. My one of my college friends and I had the same birthday, and his name was Trey.
Oh,
And but they like nicknamed him Tank, and so like we celebrated our 21st birthdays together, and like I'm pretty
I
sure I
love
had more
that.
shots than he took.
I
Like
believe
it
it.
was,
Oh my God, that
anyways,
I
the
love that. I
college
mean,
memories just
I
came
love
flooding. When
that.
you started calling him Trey, I was just like, oh my gosh.
To be
So
quite honest, it's sticking. And like when I hear a story like
love
that, I'm
it.
like, oh, okay, maybe we just go with it. I don't know.
I love it. I'm a fan. But what I was gonna say about my third then, so not Trey, Jersey.
Yeah.
Um, so when I found out I was pregnant with her, and I did the math and looked, 37 weeks was August 31st on the dot, and Junie was August 9th, Cora was August 7th, and I was like, "Are you kidding me? Are
I
you
mean,
kidding me?"
yeah. What are the odds?
Yeah,
Literally.
and so like my OB was wonderful, and like, pregnancy after loss that second time around was a little softer in some ways, a little more manageable in some ways, but also a lot more intense in a lot of ways. But my OB was wonderful, and because I said like, okay, 37 weeks is August 31st, and she was like, well, Wednesday would be better for my schedule. Not in a pressuring way at all. Like we were having very much just a discussion. Like it wasn't like, well,
Yeah.
I'm going to do this because it's more convenient for me. But she was just like, well, if you wanted to do Wednesday, I was like, nope. Like I considered it, and then I
It's
was
tough.
like, nope, because if I went one more day and
And
something
something
had
happened.
happened,
Yep. Yep.
just given my whole experience, like if that works for you, please do. Like don't feel like you have to do 37 weeks either. But given my situation, I needed to. So yeah, like you said, like you didn't want to miss something or regret not going in or let your anxiety
Yeah,
get the best
that's
of you.
happened. That happened to me talking about Wolfie's induction because my plan
Yeah,
plan
yeah.
was to
Plan.
have him induced
Hold my
and
placenta, he
deliver.
said.
Oh my God, that's hilarious. And the doctor was like, "Well, I only do inductions on like Wednesdays." And I was like, "So I have to wait like 4 or 5 days past the 37-week mark." And I was like, "I don't think I'm comfortable doing 37 and a half." And he was like, "Well, let's do 36 and a half." And I was like, oh my God, does that mean NICU time? I can't, it's too early. Why can't you just
Uh-huh.
come in right
Ha,
at 37? Like I was
ha.
struggling with that decision,
Uh-huh.
but
Uh-huh.
my whole mind was like, okay, well, what if I push for 37? And he gave me the go for 36 and a half. And then something happens in between there. I was a basket, y'all. I didn't make it to that, by
Mm-hmm.
the way, guys. He was
Mm-hmm.
born at 32. But I was like, well, I'm just going to check myself in and I'm just going to hang out until
Mhm.
the 37th week mark. But
Mhm.
that I hope the decision isn't rough for you for trying to make that decision if you're PAL right now or PAL. I don't know what people is it PAL or PAL?
I usually say PAL, but
So
that's
do
just
I.
me.
Okay.
So,
Good to know. Because I was thinking about that. I was like, have I ever actually said that out loud? I just read it all the
right.
time. It's just
Our internal dialogue going external is always a weird thought.
yeah, always.
Another experience with my third pregnancy with Jersey, it was a few weeks. I think it was the week of Junie's birthday, actually. I got in a car accident, not major. I was it was almost home. A truck came out in front of me. It was a really bad intersection, and he got out of my way, and I went down in the ditch. So we did not hit each other. It could have been way worse,
Wow.
way worse. But it was terrifying, you know. And my husband's on the fire department, and this guy was on a neighboring fire department, and so I have like a fire department sticker on my car, and like we like locked eyes as he like gunned it, and I like hit my brakes and went down the ditch. But so
Oy.
then he like came running down to the ditch, and then I get out with this giant pregnant belly, and he was like, and then I was just like freaking out, and I was like, I didn't want to like add to the situation, but I was like, just so you know, like our first daughter died at full term, and now I'm like super pregnant, and so like I'm just really anxious because like all of this, and I was wearing my seatbelt. You are very pregnant, wear your, I mean, anytime wear your seatbelt, but if you're very pregnant, wear your seatbelt. I like I said, it could have been a lot worse, but like the seatbelt left like an imprint on my necklace,
Oh my
like
God.
yeah, yeah. So, anyways, so then it was fine. Like my car was a little bit dinged up, but like no airbags went off, which was actually kind of surprising because I hit the ditch. It was really steep down, hit really hard. Um, but then I went home because I just wanted to see Coral, and then we got her to bed, and then I went to the hospital. Jersey was moving, but I was just like, if I don't go in after
Mm-hmm.
this happened,
Mm-hmm.
and then the next morning she's not moving, like I could not forgive myself. So that was just
That's it.
another situation of like, just go in.
If
And
you will
then of
regret
course,
not going in, go.
yeah.
Go.
And then of course, like I told when I went in for the so we exchanged info, me and this guy did, but like we're not gonna make an insurance claim like if I get a new bumper because like that's gonna cost more than if we just like got the bumper repaired or whatever. And the guy was so nice, like he checked on me a few days later and stuff, and I like texted him like once Jersey was born, like, oh
Oh,
good.
wow. That's nice.
Small town stuff. Like he's like friends of friends, so like yeah. Anyways, when I went to the hospital, I said like I just explained like this is what happened, this is why I'm here. I'm here for my own anxiety. Um, but like we didn't do any sort of automobile claim, so like please don't claim it that way or whatever. So then of course like Jersey's like a year and a half old, and I get like a bill because they did put it as like an automobile thing. So I do also want to speak like don't ever hesitate going in, but I also want to just acknowledge that like there is a whole nother side of things of dealing with like the bills and stuff that come with it. But
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
your baby's life is also priceless.
Oh
So
God. That's
there's
the
that.
thing. Yeah.
But
No, everyone, yeah. They do payment plans, they do payment options,
hmm
and
hmm
if you've already done stuff that year and you've hit your deductible, I mean,
yeah,
you,
that's
yeah.
always my thought too, is like, okay, well, I'm gonna have a birth around the corner. Hope well, I mean, regardless of living or dead, you're gonna have to give
Yeah,
birth at some point.
regardless.
So
Yeah. It's a nightmare. It's
yeah.
not fun. It's not fun
Yeah.
going back in, but you have to make that decision, trust your gut
hmm
and go in and if something bad happens and you regret not going in, that's, just go, man.
Yeah.
Go.
And that is a lot of where my mind has been through my pregnancy after losses. Just because like the day before Junie died, I did notice she slowed down, but everyone was like, they would have told you, like they were
Yeah.
so nonchalant about fetal movement. And so like that is a very driving force that motivates me and how I navigate all of this. But
Yeah.
as always, we are all different people. So
And every pregnancy has a different protocol. And I think I posted about this, I think yesterday. My first pregnancy, the protocol was like normal shit. Like we're going to monitor your blood pressure. And
yeah.
if you have any blinding headaches, let us know. It's just like the normal stuff that they tell you during a healthy, normal pregnancy. Well, because Brody, lack of movement as well, I was not coached properly on what it should feel like. He
Mhm.
passed the 10 kicks, but they were not as strong as they normally were. I didn't know that was an indicator of anything. And
Mhm.
then I wake
Mhm.
up and he's not moving at all. So it's
Mhm.
like, so for my second pregnancy with Wolfie, it was monitoring movement, consistent,
Mhm.
crazy. So when I couldn't feel him, I would spiral and I went in. I was like, I don't feel him. I don't feel him, you know. This,
Mhm.
unfortunately, Wolfie, I had PPROM, which is
Mhm.
pre-rupture of membranes, not preterm labor, but my water broke. And we went in and I had to make the decision to get him out because he kept compressing his cord after me. And I was there for 18 hours, just keeping him in as long as I could. Made the
Mhm.
decision to get him out. Now, so this third pregnancy with Trey, we are monitoring movement because of Brody, and we're
Mhm.
monitoring preterm labor slash PPROM symptoms because of Wolfie. So my
Uh-huh.
protocol is fucking crazy for this third one
Mhm.
because of my history. So this is what I want to
Yeah.
drive home. Everybody is different, just like you said, we're all different.
Mhm.
Entering into a pregnancy after loss for me was having a protocol that I followed. So when I was doing
Yes, like
pre,
almost kind of like a
yes,
flow chart. Yeah. And like I really
yes.
think, and I've talked to people about just like these birth plans and door signs and letters to family, like even if you don't necessarily make them to actually use them, literally like sitting down and reading like someone's like birth plan after loss can be helpful just to like start
That's so smart.
wrapping your mind around how these things might go. And like especially if you're like one of those people that can't even like visualize or anticipate like,
Mhm.
oh, I'm going to give birth again, because like that's a very normal protective mechanism that we do as humans of like can't anticipate it. And so like even just like reading through one and maybe like jotting some stuff down for yourself, whether it be for
Yeah.
pregnancy or for birth, I think can be very helpful and empowering.
100%. I love that. And then I get
Yeah.
questions from moms like, did you bring anything of Brody's to the hospital when Wolfie was
Hmm.
born? And I didn't get there, but it was nice to know that I was going to have, his wolf there. I was going to have
Hmm.
his photo there for pictures.
Hmm.
I was going to have him present in that room with his
Hmm.
items and his things that were special to us.
Hmm.
We have stone hearts that we just give each other all the time. And
Love
and
that.
I held the stone heart as I pushed Brody. And so that heart was going to be there. So yes, absolutely. Have
Yeah.
that plan
Yeah.
to bring those things if it brings you some
Yeah,
peace.
and like my hospital packing list was like for me. And it,
Yeah,
it was like for labor and then like for postpartum, because it was like I hope I will, and everything was hope and if. What you messaged me
it's
right
true.
before we hopped on was like hopeful thinking. I liked that better than wishful thinking.
Yeah.
I was like, that is a great phrase. But yeah, my
Yeah.
hospital packing list was like for me. And then it was I had a Junie list, and so I brought like my Junie bear and a picture of her and things like that. And I actually like, again, this might sound crazy to if anyone's listening to this that has not experienced loss, but like I almost wanted my in-laws to like bring Junie bear to the hospital to have kind of that first sibling meeting,
Oh,
but I
wow.
like didn't know how to like do that. And then I was kind of like, I'm gonna feel crazy. And so I did just end up bringing Junie Bear in with us. Like if you've thought that, if you consider that, it's not crazy.
And
Like I just want you to
you know
know
what? I
that.
really like that because here's where I'm at too. Because when you are so engulfed in your first one dying, you become not obsessed, but they are your world. And then when you
It's
have
like
a
tunnel
second,
vision.
yeah, and then when you have a
Yeah.
second, you want so badly for them to be remembered, but then you kind of
Hmm.
want to keep the identity of the second one. If the first one was alive, they're separate, they're two separate babies, and Wolfie needed his
Yeah.
birthday. Like he needed that.
Yeah.
So I didn't
Yeah.
want it to mix with with the death of his brother. So I love that idea of having your time with your baby after loss during their delivery and then integrating the big brother.
Yeah, and I
Like
really
that's
wanted that like that normal sibling meeting. And so I didn't ultimately do it because like my bear doesn't need to be babysat or anything, but
yeah.
it
Hey,
was,
listen.
and it was really something that I like saw more clarity of in when we had our third and then we
Good.
had the meeting and stuff. And so when so the first time I was actually away from Coral overnight was when Jersey was born. And part of that
Mm.
is because she was 6 months old when COVID happened. You know, we had no weddings to go to. We didn't go out of town. We didn't go to the country music festival. All these things didn't happen. And so like it was just kind of natural that I was not away from her. So anyways, we got home from the hospital, and actually, if you followed me for a while, you'll know that when Jersey was born, our house was under major construction. So our contractor actually showed up to our house before my in-laws did with my living kid. It was really funny. And he was like, "Oh, like Mitch, like how's Amanda doing? I know she's like super pregnant." And he's like, "Oh, good. We just had the baby yesterday. Like
Oh,
literally
geez.
got home 3 minutes ago." Like he like followed us into the driveway, which was really funny. But anyways,
So much.
that was the tangent, my life. Oh, look, a squirrel. So then my in-laws came with Coral, and sent, I had packed clothes for them, air quote, because Junie, and I had them like wearing matching outfits for when they met Jersey for the first time, which, there's so few moments that we can kind of integrate our babies that have died in quote, I'm air quoting normal ways because
Hmm.
like nothing is normal about this. But that felt least worse to have them meet Jersey together because I didn't know how that felt with Coral because it's really weird and complicated when it's only your dead kid and then you're only your living kid.
Yeah.
And so I hope that when you have Trey, if he's alive, you get to kind of reclaim and experience these moments you should have experienced with Wolfie, with
Right.
Brody.
Right. Right.
And another part of that was so no one came to the hospital with Jersey because of COVID, which was actually kind of nice. I won't lie. It was kind of nice.
Yeah.
Um, so then when my in-laws did bring Coral over to our house, once we were home with Jersey after the contractor left, I had Mitch go out and get Coral and Junie Bear first and bring her
Mhm.
in. And then we just kind of
Oh,
had a moment before the in-laws came in and met her too. And also it was really weird because again, it's like you feel like you've done this before, but you haven't. Um,
yeah.
I felt I felt weird telling a lot of people about Jersey's birth until Coral met her.
Oh, okay.
It was really, and and I feel like this is an interesting thing when you've only had a dead kid and then you had a living kid and now you're hopefully having another living kid. Like you don't know how to navigate the stuff, but you feel like you should. And so that was really interesting that
Yeah. Yeah.
like we did tell people. And so another thing about my whole birth plan too is I got induced at 37 weeks with both Coral and Jersey. But I did not want anyone to know that plan because when Junie died, I had kind of not told a lot of people about how many ultrasounds and appointments I was having with Junie because I didn't want anyone to worry. Like, how dumb is
Right.
that? Like, it
Wow.
was
Wow.
kind of ridiculous. Um, so anyways, the day she died was my last regularly scheduled MFM appointment. And so I had told everyone about it because it was like, okay, I'm going to be induced Monday if I don't go into labor. And so I was like, oh, it's my last ultrasound. I've actually been having a few extra ultrasounds. And everyone's like, oh, you're so lucky. Like, I'm so jealous you had all those extra ultrasounds. I'm like, no, this isn't a good thing. And then she died. So it was like, anyways. So when I was going to give birth a second and third time, I did not want anyone to know that I was being induced because that was super triggering because
Right. Right.
everyone knew about Junie's appointment. And all day while I was in labor with my dead kid, I was getting texts of like, oh, how did your appointment go? And like, I didn't text my mother-in-law back. And so then she started to get, just like what's going on. And then like, I drive an orange car. People saw it at the hospital. I was like getting Snapchats of like, you're having a baby today.
Oh
Or
my
like,
God. Oh God. Oh
my
God.
friend
Yeah. That's so
texted me
much.
and then I didn't respond. And so then she like called them, like left a voicemail, like, I can't wait to meet the baby and blah, 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 blah. And just all of that. So going into my next pregnancy and delivery, like one of the things in my birth plan, my birth preferences with Coral and then with Jersey was no visitors or updates given to any family or friends until mom and dad approve a request. And
Absolutely.
I, on my like intake paperwork, I even checked like do not show up on the hospital visitor list because I did not want, and I could not handle anyone knowing. And for a lot of people, I know it's very different. They want everyone to know, and I did not want any of that pressure. So know that that is an option if you also need to like keep things quiet. No one, no one has any obligation other than your medical team to know any specific details about when your baby's going to be born, unless you want to share that.
Boom.
Because you're very obviously pregnant when you're usually most people are very obviously pregnant when you're very full term. And so everyone knows without you telling them, but you do not owe anyone your baby's due date. I've had a lot of lost moms for the rainbows just tell people a birth month or
Yep.
even like a season because like, look, you said, hopeful thinking when Trey might be born, but like, okay,
No idea.
hopefully summer,
And
hopefully fall, like
that's the
that's
thing.
okay.
2 things I wanna add is, 1, doing any of this stuff is not a jinx. You're not gonna
No.
jinx your baby's life
If we could
if we
jinx our,
plan.
if we had that much power, our babies would be alive. If we had that
Yes.
much power, we would not be having a conversation like this.
No, it
So
doesn't work
don't
like that. Yeah, it does if
don't hold back from any of this
yeah, it's
because
okay to
of that
plan
fear.
ahead. And I know you're
Yes.
fearful. Oh my God, if I make a plan and they don't make it, it's going to be worse. Okay. And that's absolutely fine. But sometimes, like you said, making the plan will help you relax into it, maybe feel more connected to what's happening, wrap your brain around this, maybe working out for the best and
Yeah.
getting a
Yeah.
plan down to ease your anxiety. Obviously, everybody can do whatever they want to do, but it's not buying things and planning things and writing things down and saying things is not a jinx, so don't do
Yes.
that.
And I will want to throw out there too. It is more than okay to say if the baby's born alive. It is
We all
more
say it.
than okay. I had to tell anyone around me during my pregnancy after loss of don't use the word reassured because my provider was using reassured and I was like nothing can reassure me
No.
in this, like nothing can. Like thank you for like honestly probably the only this tiny bit of thing that reassured me was measuring my baby's placentas in my
Mhm.
second and my third pregnancies.
Mhm.
So your Brody had a small placenta.
Mhm.
Junie had a small placenta. We did not know that their placentas were small until they were born, until they
Mhm.
died and were born. That is the only
Mhm.
time. So, um, part of the stillbirth prevention advocacy work that I do is with a team called Measure the Placenta. If you're not familiar, you should check our social media and website pages out. And when I was pregnant with Junie and when she was growth restricted, we even asked our MFM if they could measure her placenta because they measure everything on a baby. So we're like, why don't you? They said placental insufficiency is why she's growth restricted. So we're like, okay, measure this placenta. And they're like, no, we can't do that. We don't know how to do it. It's not necessary. We're doing all these other things. You'll be okay. And then she's like, here, hold my small placenta. And so when she was first born, like her placenta was sent just to hospital pathology. And we got the report back and like it said nothing was concerning. We did do an autopsy for her. So then in my second pregnancy, about halfway through, I connected with another local lost mom, and her son Elijah died of a small placenta. And she found this out again after he had died and from a podcast and learned about you mentioned him earlier, Dr. Kleiman at Yale University, who is a placental pathologist. So most hospital pathologists don't have any training on placentas, and the placenta is the only like discarded temporary organ the body creates. And so like here's your baby, here's your uterus, here's the placenta with the cord.
Mhm.
And so your body, the mom's body feeds the placenta with, blood flow. And then that's how the baby it sustains the baby's life. Um, and so
Like
right now,
the
as a
most
standard
important
of
thing.
care, yes, as a standard of care, the placenta is barely looked at during pregnancy, even in high risk pregnancies like Junie's. So the hospital pathology said nothing's concerning. After I met Elijah's mom, I sent Junie's placenta slides. So when you've had a loss, generally the hospital will take slides of the placenta, and it's kind of like looking at like when you cut a tree down and you look at the rings and a stump of a tree. That's kind of how looking at a placenta
Mhm.
is like, from
Mhm.
my understanding. I am a photographer. I am not a scientist.
Yeah.
I'm just a lost mom that advocates for this stuff. But so they can actually look at the placenta slides under a microscope and learn stuff from it. And so I got Judy's placenta report back, now that I'm like halfway through another pregnancy, and her placenta was 0.1 percentile for size. That is tiny.
It's tiny.
And honestly, she only lived as long as she did to 38 weeks and 2 days because she was also small, because the body's smart
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
mostly. And it slowed down her growth because the placenta was small and knew it could not sustain. So that's why her head was still 38 weeks and then her body was small. So she was 4 pounds, 13 ounces. So she was in the first percentile for size and her placenta was 0.1 percentile. And so, like, not only is the size of the placenta alone important to look at, the ratio between the size of the placenta and the baby is
Mhm.
important to look at.
Mhm.
It's a fetal placental ratio.
Do you
Um,
know when this starts to show itself?
So IUGR comes on most strongly in the third trimester.
Okay.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I don't know how far you're gonna get in the third trimester again.
Mhm.
But one thing, so we have we have several posts on our page about what to do if you do encounter this pushback, with advocating for EPV during a pregnancy. And also EPV should be done during every pregnancy, not just lost pregnancies. But you can advocate for yourself by counting those pics. You can
Okay.
use the Merwin's EPV calculator app is also a free pregnancy app. And so if you do get the EPV measurements taken, you can plug the width, height, and the length into that, and then it will calculate that percentile. And it will also now calculate those ratios I was talking about of the fetal to the placental ratio.
Mhm.
And then also the fetal percentile to the placenta percentile ratio. They're two different things. Essentially the placenta growth tracks on what should be a kind of a hockey stick. If I'm, again, photographer, not scientist, but
Mhm.
it's like an
Mhm.
exponential growth. So the ratios change throughout the pregnancy, and then also, your baby's growth is changing. So all of that. Um, Another way, like I said, if you actually get to experience the third trimester, um, on the normal field of view on an ultrasound, if the placenta is like fitting that angle, if it's fitting that screen or bigger, that means it's big enough. That means it's not small, essentially. An overly large placenta is also concerning. So we like to say like a small placenta or an abnormal placenta size, like
Mhm.
especially if you had a first percentile baby and a 99th percentile placenta, that is not great.
Mhm. Mhm.
That is a risk factor basically. And
Mhm.
detecting a small placenta is not boom, 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 get baby out right now, right?
Right.
Like it's nothing like that. It's just another data point in the pregnancy to assess everything.
Right.
And seeing a small placenta is a risk factor, just like seeing high blood pressure, seeing preeclampsia, seeing a shortened cervix, having an
Absolutely.
early rupture of membranes. It's just another risk factor, for
Absolutely.
stillbirth or just poor birth outcomes. But so if you are getting pushback from your provider, and if they are kind of looking at trace placenta, if it's fitting in that normal field of view or it's larger,
Yeah.
that is air quote reassuring.
Yes.
Um, so I only had Plural's placenta measured one time during my pregnancy with her, because of there was the Stillbirth Summit happening in Minnesota. There was a MFM doctor that I hadn't seen yet, but that was local to me, and Dr. Kleiman was there, so he was talking to her over lunch. So I was able to like go see her for one MFM appointment. And so then when I was pregnant with Jersey, I went to see Elijah's mom's MFM that she had already like put through the ringer on doing EPVs. And so every ultrasound with Jersey from 20 weeks on, they measured her placenta at MFM, which was really cool to see. And it was
Yeah.
really, I remember that was one of the times I cried during her pregnancy of like relief of seeing her weight and seeing her placenta weight, or size, and seeing them
Mhm.
in
Mhm.
in the right space together. So hopefully that can help you
And
navigate that a
and to
little bit
reinforce what you
too.
said earlier, when you get this news that there is a risk factor in the pregnancy, regardless of what
Hmm.
it is, whether it's, even a marginal cord insertion or whatever,
Hmm.
or a two cord vessel or whatever it is, we want to make sure that
Two
as the
vessel cord.
two vessel, sorry, two vessel cord. I knew that didn't sound right, but I
Pregnancy
was like,
after lost brain.
I'm so dumb. I am so dumb. I don't even know what I'm
I
saying
looked for
half the
my
time.
phone the other day with the flashlight on my phone. So it's okay. I'm right there with you. It's all good.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one.
Hot mess express.
Oh my god, we wear it proudly at this point because it's like,
Yes.
hey,
So
don't
yes,
expect any less or more from me. Um,
any of those risk factors.
any of those risk factors, again, you don't have to get like the baby out right now. But what you will start to do as you proceed through the third trimester is establish, is the baby safer inside of you or outside of you? Will they
Hmm.
thrive better inside or outside? According to doctors, inside is always the answer unless there is a significant risk factor that
Hmm.
would require you to take them out early, and they would thrive better in the NICU. Like, don't be afraid of the NICU if it means the baby has a better chance of survival outside of you.
Hmm. So that is what should have happened with Junie, is
Hmm.
that there should have been this many risk factors, starting to compound. against her and against us. And especially with IUGR, because like society has really sold us this idea that in is always better. And so, and that is not always the case. Like IUGR, there's, it's called growth restriction. It's called interuterine growth restriction for a reason. It means that your environment in your uterus, probably the small placenta or something, trophoblast inclusions happening in the placenta, that is causing them to be restricted. And so then at that point, getting them out is a better environment, even if it means an earlier delivery. And that doesn't always mean an earlier delivery for everybody, but in or out is kind of what OB/GYN comes down to. One more thing I was going to add before we wrap about advocating for yourself. So if you're pushing for these EPV measurements, you're wanting to get your baby's placenta measured, they won't do it, they won't do it, won't do it. One thing you can do is put in your birth plan that when the baby is born, when the placenta is delivered, have them weigh the placenta. So typically they only will do that if there's a loss, and that's because it is sent to pathology. And there are trimmed and untrimmed versions of placenta weights. Generally, if it's done in the delivery room, whether that be a C-section or a vaginal delivery, that is likely an untrimmed placenta, and that is when the cord is still attached and the membranes and all of that stuff. When it's sent to pathology, they usually like remove some stuff, and so that's a trimmed weight, just so you know.
Oh, that
But
makes sense. Yeah.
I highly recommend putting in any birth plan, whether you're pregnant after loss or just your normal mom that hasn't experienced this terrible trauma we
Yeah.
have the placenta weighed and measured. Have it photographed too, because both sides, both the maternal surface and the fetal surface are very important. And those photos can show a lot of information as well. If your baby is alive, born alive, with no complications, you can still have it sent to pathology. You can still have it sent to a placental pathologist like Dr. Kleiman. And a lot of information can be gained from that placenta. It's really kind of like the key to the pregnancy and your baby's health.
Yeah.
So just wanted to mention that, like, it's it's really surprising. It's really slightly terrifying that that is something not done standardly. Like we're not measuring this critical organ during pregnancy, and then you deliver this organ and we do nothing with it except throw it away. Like
It's so weird.
it's really wild to me. And so I'm really just trying to spread that awareness that those things are not happening. That is other than an ultrasound, other than like looking at the location, looking at the cord, they do very little
Yeah, they do very
around
little.
the
I've
placenta.
had
They
to
do
demand
very,
placenta and cord monitoring. I've had to demand it.
yes,
Yeah.
it's it's crazy. It really is crazy.
It's
So
not easy.
make sure you put that in your birth plan to have that done. Especially like if you're maybe only having your first baby after loss, like, and you might want to have more babies, that can be helpful. It can also give you information about their health 5, 10 years down the line if your baby's alive. Like it's
It's
crazy,
true.
crazy
It's
stuff.
so
So
important. It should be standard. So, yeah, thank
yes,
you for
it
all
definitely should
this.
be.
It's such good
Of
information.
course. It's so good to get this out of DMs and out into the world so people can
Yeah.
learn from us.
I'm going to link everything. I may even screenshot your list if you have it for the door sign, just so on
Oh
YouTube
yeah.
I'll show it so they can look at it while we're talking about it. Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, super helpful. I mean, there's tons of topics we could talk about, but this one has just been on your mind a lot, and I'm currently living it. So I was like, yeah, let's do
Yes.
this.
And
So,
I want to point out that like, you're in your third pregnancy right now, and we've had many conversations about how you have not unpacked that baggage from Wolfie's birth and now anticipating another birth
yeah,
around the corner. And I hope, like, I know we didn't talk too detailed about your experiences, and I think that's okay right now because
yeah, that's fine.
but I hope that hearing my experience on this side of things, having had now two living children and gone through, three whole births, I hope this is helpful to kind of help you wrap your mind around it too. And so it kind of goes back to like, even if you just look at a birth plan, even if you look at a door sign, even if you don't necessarily make one for yourself, because pregnancy after loss is a whole experience in and of
Yeah.
itself. But I hope that if anyone's listening to this that are in those shoes like you are, hopefully that just can kind of get your brain moving even though you don't want it to because you're just kind of
It's
like, I
actually
think,
fun to think about it going smoothly. It keeps me going. Like if I
yeah.
consistently live in fear of it could break any minute, it could break any minute, it could break, I lose
Mm-hmm.
my mind. I did it at 3:30 a.m. last night and I was like, calm down. Everything's fine, you know. So having
Mm-hmm.
the, you know what, I'm hoping he comes on this day. We're planning because my doctor won't, my OB won't do VBAC, so I have to C-section. So I
Sure.
know he's coming this day, and this is exciting. I've got his going away. I have never packed a bag for a hospital. I've never had any of my stuff with me. I've never had a baby bedside with me. He got whisked to the NICU right after he was delivered. I met him the next day because I was knocked out. Like I've never had a quote unquote normal birthing experience. So to think that I might is actually a great feeling. I'm
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
also
kind of.
prepared that I might not, but I am
Yes.
hopeful. And
And I think that's really
yeah,
great. And you could even like start making yourself lists right now of like, if
yeah,
we get to this, and like in the experience you're at too, I think it's really helpful to think like this is our finish line. Like I will not be, you said knocked out. I was thinking knocked up. I will not be knocked up past this date, but anything can happen up
yep.
until that point.
Hmm,
And I
hmm.
think
I
that's
love it.
really important because like I always tell people in pregnancy after loss and when it comes to labor and delivery, like break it down into smaller pieces if you have to and make it more manageable because it's really
Yes.
hard.
And here
Yeah.
is one thing that I did learn. I wanted my redemption. I wanted my peaceful, beautiful birth of my living baby. I was ready for it. I was planning it. I was so happy to be able to have an experience with a living baby. It made me sad that I didn't with Brody, but I was looking forward to having that mother moment with their living baby when they're born. Now, when my water broke and I was put in the hospital, they said, we're going to keep you here for 2 weeks to try to keep him in as long as possible. And I was ready for that because I was still
Yeah.
determined to have me induced and him come
Hmm.
peacefully and nicely.
All the things.
All the things. Now, when he started to compress his cord and we lost his heartbeat twice, I said, guess what?
I don't even
My
care. I don't
my
even care,
shit is
right?
going out the fucking window. I don't even
Hmm.
care anymore. They said 32 weeks is usually, they said that is the cutoff for when they will thrive in the NICU. Don't be afraid of the NICU. I was terrified of the NICU,
Hmm.
terrified.
Hmm.
And I said, you know what? My plan has to go out the window because
Yep.
I need him alive. And
Yep.
that's what I don't want anybody to be afraid of is making a decision that you don't want to make, but you have to
Scary
for the
decision.
best of your baby. Be
The least
prepared for
worst.
anything to happen. Have your plan, stick to it because we have to have hope. The only thing we can
Hmm.
do is grasp onto some vision or image we have that gets us through. That first cry is all I could think about. I just want to hear the
What
first
really,
cry.
what really got me with Coral, because I thought so much about that first cry.
Hmm.
When she opened her eyes, I was
Oh,
like, oh,
oh, wow.
F,
Yes,
oh,
yes.
F. That
It
is when
drives
I like
us.
lost it. And
Yeah.
like, it was also wild because like she cried and then she stopped. And I
So
was just
many
like,
ups and downs. Yeah, even when they
give you a little,
hear, yeah.
let me give you a visual. She was like up, like I just was looking
It's,
at her like this. And she stopped crying. I was like sitting there going like, dude, like, it was like I
well, we
thought in the
still
movies
don't
they just
believe it.
scream
Yeah.
and scream and scream and scream.
Yeah, we
Yeah, and
don't
she didn't
believe it,
open her
even if
eyes
they're
right away, and then
alive.
she did, and I was like, oh, like that's really when it switched to like this is a different experience, was
Right.
those eyes opening. So I hope you get to experience that, and if you don't, we're still here
We're
supporting
here
you,
for you. So yeah, I'm gonna put all the
and it'll be
links and
okay.
all your
All the things.
handles and they'll hit you up and the only way we get through this is to listen to mamas who have already done it. That's what helps
Hmm.
me to provide some
Hmm.
insight. You may not believe everything or agree with everything we say, but there's got to be a nugget in there that may be helpful, and that's all we hope.
You take what works for you, you leave what doesn't, all the things.
But we're good. Yeah.
That's why I go back to call it birth preferences. Make a list of what you prefer
Mm-hmm.
that they
I
can
love it.
default to. Yes. All right.
So helpful,
Thanks
girl.
for the chat.
Yeah, girl. See you out there.
Sounds good. Good luck.
Thanks.
Good luck and
Bye.
Godspeed.
Godspeed.
Bye.
Bye.